Hello and welcome to another HanDrinksSolo wine info video. And today we're discussing a fascinating wine called the Pas de Nom Creative Batch White Blend. Pas de Nom pretty much means no name brand, but in French it's far fancier. The Pas de Nom label is in fact an experimental range of wines released by Beau Constantia. Beau Constantia is a remarkable little estate situated at 350 meters above sea level, there or thereabouts, right against the foothills of Table Mountain, also very close to the ocean. It's a fascinating little property, but it is still situated in the rather conservative Constantia wine route. Now, for firecracker winemaker Megan van der Merwe at Beau Constantia, she may or may not sometimes feel a little bit restricted by the atmosphere of conservatism that does seep through the Constantia wine valley. So the creative batch wines are really just an opportunity for her to give a little thin slice into the amazing, wonderful wanderings and ponderings that unfold in her incredible wine brain. And in case I hadn't made it obvious already, Megan and her wonderful processes and ponderings are well worth following for even the most fringe of wine geeks. She has this amazing desire to understand things rather than just accept the status quo, and to explore lesser known cultivars and to experiment with new techniques in the cellar, which for a wine lover who prizes discovery, Megan van der Merwe is a winemaker that you want to follow closely. Now, when it comes to exploring the wine in the glass, this is definitely one of the wines that you want to sample first and then ask questions later. And when you sniff it, you'll see why. So up front there is the most fascinating mix of smoky roasted apricot, but then mixed in with perhaps a bit of cardamom and coriander seed. And so the mix of that smoky roasted element along with those spices might lead some to come up with the flavor note spiced biltong or beef jerky if you prefer. And then beneath that rather surly spicy element, there is some very pronounced ripe peach fruit and a touch of floral and even an almond nuttiness. So there's a lot going on. When we progress from the nose into taking a sip, well, the first thing one notices is the texture. There's a lot of phenolic grip. There's a lot of pithiness in there, like the inside of an orange or a grapefruit. And the fruit itself is this crazy mix of sweet and sour. Again, there's a lot going on. So let's unpack it so we can understand it better. Now, if we are to adopt the fruit basket approach where we just mention some actual flavors that are in the wine, I would say up front, very ripe peach, but then also some apricot and some Meyer lemon, like lemon pith and a bit of white citrus, as well as herbal elements that come through on the palate. The finish is also super fresh, and this is where for me, perhaps some of that grapefruit and lemon morphs into a kind of crisp, green Granny Smith apple. So when you've had a chance to smell and taste this, and you have smoky roasted apricot and sweet peach and floral and saltiness and coriander and cardamom and Meyer lemon pith and grapefruit, that's a lot going on, and it may lead you to ask something like,
"My God, man,
what the fuck just happened?
I dead?"
So what we're going to do is break down this blend component by component so that we know what's actually in the wine. And then I asked Megan van der Merwe to share her rationale, what she was hoping to achieve by including each one of these cultivars. One of the grapes is something that you may not have heard of before, a cultivar called Fernao Pires, which I will talk about right at the end in a little more detail if you have the stones for it. So here is a thin slice of what we have in the wine today. 66% is an old vine Chenin Blanc component. And you might go, well, I know what that's all about. But it's probably worth noticing that these old vine Chenin Blanc components were harvested really early. So lower sugar, higher acid. Then it was fermented on the skins. And then it was fermented in an oxidative style. So perhaps not so familiar after all. When it comes to tracking exactly what this component brings to the wine, given that it takes up 66%, well, a lot of it is going to be all about those smoky phenols that come with a skin contact white, as well as some of the nuttier, saltier elements that do come out of oxidative winemaking styles. Incidentally, I've left a link in the video text next to the video to another video that I made that focuses on oxidative winemaking style and the flavors that it can generate within a wine. But back to the creative batch white blend, the next biggest portion is a 15% component of Fernao Pires. Fernao Pires is a cultivar that is grown in Portugal and pretty much nowhere else in the world other than South Africa. From a sensory perspective, winemaker Megan van der Merwe tells us that when Fernao Pires is fermenting in the tank, it smells a lot like a curry, which at first can be worrying. But when you taste those cardamom and coriander notes within the context of the wine, you see just how incredible an element it can bring to the mix. The third biggest component is a 9% Russan component, which can add flavors like Meyer lemon or apricot. But what it also does, according to winemaker Megan van der Merwe, is add a waxy patina over all the fruit. And you can taste that. It's not just the grippy tannins from the skin contact Chenin, but there is also a waxiness, especially towards the finish, that kind of coats the fruit as it fades on the palate. And then there is a 7% component of Verdilla from the Swartland, which was again harvested quite early, lower sugar levels, higher acid levels, lower alcohol levels, and it brings this intense, laser-like, bright acid citrus component to it all with limes and lemons going on. And at this point you might go, but Han, that only adds up to 97%.
What gives, man? Yeah, what gives?
Well, there is a final 3% Viognier. And I'm well aware that 3 is a very low number. But here's the interesting thing about this component. Winemaker Megan van der Merwe harvested this patch of Viognier fruit incredibly ripe, high sugar, high alcohol, high impact. So while 3% is a low number, the impression of richness in the wine really is altered and increased by the presence of the small Viognier component. And what it will bring with it is some of that ripe peach element that I talked about, as well as a hint of nuttiness, as well as an increase in the overall alcohol levels. And as we've mentioned in other videos, alcohol acts a little bit like glue in a wine, kind of sticking all the other fresher, higher acid components together. And it can also act as a magnifying glass on the fruit components. So a little more alcohol actually can boost the perception of fruity in the other components. And that's what this little tiny 3% of Viognier is partially bringing to the wine. So there we are. We touched on all the components in the wine. But if you even have half a bone of intellectual curiosity in your body, you will no doubt want to dig a little deeper on the rather unknown cultivar of Fernao Pires. But I know I've kept you here a while already, so I'm going to make this a super speedy tour with just the top 6 fun facts about Fernao Pires. Fact number 1, Fernao Pires is from Portugal, where it is often referred to as Maria Gomez. Fact 2, it's a grape with very thick skins, which often have more flavor compounds, but it's also a grape that has high yields, which means it's great for farmers who want to have high crops with low input. Fact 3, Fernao Pires is the 24th most planted white cultivar in South Africa, a little bit behind Bukatral, but just ahead of Alvarinho. Fact 4, Fernao Pires, or Maria Gomez, is in fact classified as a table grape, but it has been used to create some fascinating single cultivar wines, not least of all by winemaker Megan van der Merwe through her solo label, Processes. Fact 5, wine geek and winemaking legend Peter Volser from Blank Bottle also uses Fernao Pires in some of his white blends. Fact 6, 50% of all the Fernao Pires planted in South Africa is in fact planted in the Northern Cape. But in the Western Cape, Robertson is the dominant region for Fernao Pires, with 25% of our entire Fernao Pires vines being found in the Robertson Valley. Okay, so that's all we have time for today. But if you enjoyed today's video, please subscribe to the HanDrinksSolo YouTube video channel, where we publish 6 videos each month and we talk about things like unusual cultivars like Fernao Pires, but also touch on wine history, wine science, viticulture, and some of the rising winemaking stars that are coming out of the dynamic South African winelands.